Welcome to the Clear to Send podcast, a podcast about wireless engineering, where we educate you on Wi-Fi technology, talk about design tips, troubleshooting, interviews, and the tools. Here are your hosts, Roel and Francois.
Today's show is brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. Just go to audibletrial.com/clear2send and browse the fantastic selection of audio programs. Download a title free and start listening. It's that easy. Again, go to audibletrial.com/clear2send.
Hi guys, welcome to a brand new episode of the Clear to Send show. This is episode 133, and today we'll be talking about 802.11 PHY Types. Just before we dig into the subject, I'm here with Roel. Hi Roel.
Hello everybody.
How are you doing?
Doing very good. Early in the morning, but I'm used to waking up early.
Yeah, and I tried this new routine this week where I wake up early too, so it feels good. It feels like you're getting a lot done before everyone else wakes up.
But don't you feel more tired at the end of the day?
Yeah, I just go to bed earlier. And I waste less time at night.
Oh, that's so.
Good. Yeah, I know it's good. It worked out for me. I think I'm going to continue this week.
You're waking up really early though, like way earlier than me. I wake up at 5.
Yeah, I tried 4. So
yeah, that's only an hour before me, but still sounds crazy.
Yeah, for some reason, the minute in the morning, it feels like it's you could use every minute,
and it's very quiet too. Like everyone's still sleeping.
Yeah, it's very quiet. Nothing is open except the Tim Hortons here.
Yeah, I wish I had some Tim Hortons. I'll tell you that.
All right. So right before we talk about the subject of the week, let's do the 10 questions interview this week. So this week it's going to be with Glenn Kate. So Glenn is pretty known, right, to the community. But if you don't know him, he's a great guy. And you'll get to know him a little bit more with this 10-question interview. And then if you want to see Glenn's face and if you want to see the photograph that you took during this interview, you guys can head to the show notes, clear2send/133. So here it is, a 10-question interview with Glenn Kate. What's your name?
Hey, my name is Glenn Kate.
Where do you live?
I live in St. Petersburg, Florida.
Where were you born?
I was born in St. Petersburg, Florida.
What is special about that place?
It is got the same name as St. Petersburg, Russia, because the founder was from St. Petersburg, Russia.
What's your job?
I am a Wi-Fi engineer at Tech Data in Clearwater, Florida.
Why did you decide to do the work you're doing now?
Well, they wanted me to come and help them. They had some issues and wanted a Wi-Fi engineer to help them with the issues, so I came on board.
What would you do if you were not doing wireless?
Amateur radio. I love ham radio.
What could you give a 40 minutes presentation on with absolutely no preparation?
I could probably talk about a lot of ham radio stuff, about amateur antennas, and I could probably throw a few Wi-Fi terms in there as well.
What is something you think everyone should do at least once in their lives?
They need to go overseas and realize no matter where they live, there are people who are probably less fortunate for them, and they can always give back to the community.
What do you think your job will look like in 10 years?
It's hard to say. RF and Wi-Fi is not going away, so it would just be more and more of that technology and how it's working in the industry.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, it was really good. So I believe Glenn did some volunteer work. I don't know. I don't remember exactly where, but on one island in the Caribbean. He speaks Spanish very well.
Yeah, that's also not a bad place to do some work.
Yeah. So that was interesting, and
I really like his message there about going overseas and seeing how other people have their situations, right? And understanding that a lot of times what we have is actually quite a lot compared to what other people have.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like the idea of traveling, right? I think last week we had Greg Skeen that he said that everyone should travel. So it's kind of like here when you travel, you also realize that.
And they also said in 10 years, RF and Wi-Fi will still be there.
Yeah.
Which is good news again for us.
All right, so let's talk about 802 to the 11 PHY types. So this is just the we're just continuing our little series on some Wi-Fi fundamentals topics. We talked about RF characteristics. We talked about association authentication, and this week we'll be talking about the different 802 to the 11 PHY types.
And the standard defines different PHY types. And these there's many of them, obviously, because this started since when 802.11 was first brought out there. But these PHY types, they include the data rates that are supported by each one and what band they operate in. And the data rates that they support, or the data rates that a client can use with each PHY type, depends on the channel width and the modulation they're using, right? So we're going to kind of go into those details.
Yeah. And before we start, if you want to follow up what we're talking about, you can actually go to the show note, and we would have like a table that you can see or download there to follow up what we're talking about. And pretty much each PHY type is pretty much each iteration of the Wi-Fi protocol. You could see it as this way as well.
Yeah, and then it's a PHY type because PHY, and just in case you don't know the spelling of that, and it's because it's the physical layer. It's the way it's the layer which the transmission of Wi-Fi is going over.
All right, so we could start with the first PHY type defined in the standards. So we usually call it 802.11 or 802.11 prime.
Mm-hmm.
And it got released in 1997, so it's about 20 years ago now, 21 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it seems far away, but in the great scheme of things, it's not. Right?
Yeah, with all the types of devices out there, it's quite not. It's still prevalent, I think.
Yeah, and if you compare Wi-Fi, the Wi-Fi standard to other standards, the Wi-Fi standards is the one that's gets new updates the more frequently, right? Between 97 and 2018, we got different iterations of the protocol, right?
Yeah, and this one specifically supports DSSS, or direct sequence spread spectrum. And the channel width for this is 22 megahertz wide, and it's only in the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum. And when this came out in 1997, it only supported 1 or 2 megabits per second. So if you think about how the throughput back then, not many people were using Wi-Fi, so the throughput and capacity just wasn't required when this came out. It's also one spatial stream. So nowadays, if you look at client devices, they support 2, 3, or even 4 spatial streams. But when 802.11 Prime came out, it only supported one spatial stream, and it was a single input, single output.
Then we got 802.11a, which is the first Wi-Fi protocol defined on the 5 gig band. It got released in 1999. It's using OFDM, orthogonal frequency division multiplexing. So with OFDM, instead of having a channel width of 22 megahertz, we have a channel width of 20 megahertz. So it's a little narrower. And we get better data rates. We can go up to 54 megabits per second. So the minimum data rate is 6 megabits per second, and we can go up to 54 megabits per second. And once again, at that time, we didn't have advanced MIMO, and we only had one spatial streams available to us.
Yeah, and this 802.11a is actually still really common out there. And just yesterday, I was at a network site, and their APs only supported 802.11a or B, I believe.
Wow,
And so,
that's pretty old stuff.
Yeah, I was there. I wasn't there troubleshooting Wi-Fi. So when I hopped on and started looking, I saw, oh, you need to upgrade your APs because they were using all Macs in the office, and I wanted to tell them you could really get more out of your Mac, your Wi-Fi adapter, if you upgrade it to at least 802.11n.
Yeah. Do you remember what type of APs it was?
Yeah, they were Meraki MR16s.
Wow. Okay. Wow.
Yeah, so it's important to go through the data sheet of an access point, and I'm hoping that they just had these APs for quite a while. Actually, the MR16 actually supports G as well, but they were, if you want to use the 5 gigahertz, because the 2.4 was just kind of saturated in their space, but they were using a lot of 802.11a. So that meant all their devices, if on Wi-Fi, they could only go up to 54 megabits per second on a single spatial stream. So the next PHY type here is 802.11b, which I believe 802.11b came out before 802.11a. And this is only on the 2.4 gigahertz band. And this one, instead of OFDM, it's using high rate DSSS. And this enabled data rates of 5.5 and 11 megabits per second.
Ooh.
Quite the jump there. And,
yeah.
I think I have a typo in my show notes, but yeah, that's as fast as it went. And it's still a 22 megahertz wide channel. And what you'll hear in the industry is people wanting to disable these data rates, the 802.11b, or what they call legacy data rates, right? So, and the reason for this is so we don't have to support legacy devices and have devices transmit speeds at such slow speeds, because it slows down Wi-Fi for all your much newer devices.
Yeah, and I think at this point, what's important to say that whenever the IEEE is working on the new 5 protocol, they think about speed, so they wanted to make it faster, but they also think about the backward compatibility with the PHY types that already exist out there.
Yeah, that's definitely true, because I think that's one of the problems of really moving forward with Wi-Fi is this backwards compatibility.
Yeah. Yeah, so B11B is used on the 2.4, and then we'll talk about the other ones later on, the GN, which also operate on the 2.4 and have to be backward compatible with the B. And in order to be able to handle this backward compatibility, you have to introduce a little bit of overhead that you could save if you just disable B. Mm-hmm. So that's why you hear people saying, okay, disable the B rates, so you can just have higher data rates, and also so you can save a little bit of overhead on your Wi-Fi network.
Yeah, get some more airtime back to your devices.
Yeah, exactly. Increase the throughput. So 11B, because we're using DSSS, we're back to a 22 megahertz wide channel. And if you look at the spectrum, actually the B signal looks like a mountain, when the OFDM signal looks like a plateau, has a plateau shape.
Yeah, let's see if we can add some screenshots in the show notes to show the difference. And I think MetaGeek has some really good examples there, where when Joel was still working at MetaGeek, they provided some good screenshots of the different PHY types and what they look like. So it's pretty interesting to see, especially if you're doing some spectrum analysis somewhere and you if you see that curve, then you definitely know you've got 802.11b somewhere in your area.
Yeah, and I think we produced with the podcast spectrum analysis reference sheet a few months back, where we included some pictures of what OFDM signal looks like and what a DSSS signal looks like.
Cool. So the next one we have here is 802.11g, and I think this was right before the big jump, but 802.11g was bringing OFDM to 2.4 gigahertz. So this one's called ERP, or extended rate physical, or extended rate PHY. And again, only on the 2.4 gigahertz, still doing this backwards compatibility to DSSS. But with OFDM being brought to 2.4, it now enabled the 20 megahertz wide channel, and it went up to 54 megabits per second, but still on a single spatial stream. So we did see some improvements here to 2.4 gigahertz, and I think this is why 2.4 is still really strong out there, especially in the homes. And you do definitely see this out in enterprise networks as well. If people are just using the defaults on their Wi-Fi systems, you'll see a lot of 2.4 enabled and hopefully using OFDM.
And the variation is in data rate at this point. When we talk about data rate up to 54 megabits per second, the variation in data rate is due to the different modulations that we could use that are used by those PHY protocols, right?
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah.
Because that's how you are going to get higher data rates. And like I said in the beginning, those data rates depend on the channel width and the modulation. And the more complex modulation that's being used, the higher data rate that could be achieved. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're always going to be using the highest modulation, because it is much more complex and requires a much better SNR for clients in order to get this higher modulation.
Yeah, it's related to the signal strengths you'll get and the SNR.
Our show is brought to you by Audible. Did you know you can ask Alexa to read a book to you? I have an Alexa Dot in my house, and I had my favorite book being read to me, Ready Player One. It was really awesome because audio makes great audiobooks, whether you like to listen to books to get your mind somewhere else or whether you like to learn. Sometimes I like to read biographies. I've been an Audible listener for over a year, and I absolutely love it for my commute. You will too, because the selection on Audible is phenomenal. It seems like every book that comes out in print is also in Audible. So for you guys, you can go to audibletrial.com/clear2send and you can get a book for free right now. Download it and start listening within a few seconds. So again, that's a free book for you guys. Download it at audibletrial.com/clear2send.
Yep. So why don't we talk, Francois, about the next one, which I think is the biggest change to Wi-Fi.
Yeah, 802.11 was the biggest evolution. So the technical term for 802.11n, and the one you'll see in the standard or in any packet capture you'll do, is HT, so high throughput. 802.11n is supported on both frequency band 2.4 and 5 gig. It uses OFDM. It will use the modulation techniques that we've been using since then. So BPSK, QPSK, 16 QAM, 64 QAM, and on top of that, we got the introduction of MIMO. Right, so MIMO gives us the ability to send multiple information on different stream at the same time, therefore increasing the data rate quite a bit. So that's one of the big change with 11n MIMO. Also, 11n gave us the ability to bound two 20 megahertz wide channels together to create a 40 megahertz wide channel, and therefore increasing the data rate as well again, because we have more spectrum available, we can send more data and increase the data rate. And so this gave these new features: MIMO, channel width, something else called short quad interval got introduced as well, which is a space in between each OFDM element, and all of that, multiplied the number of data rates that we could have access to, and it also increased the maximum data rate.
Yeah, and I think this is when Wi-Fi really started to take off, because people saw that number, right? They saw, whoa, 600 megabits per second. And because of the introduction of those characteristics, you combine all of those, your 40 megahertz, your MIMO, your 4 spatial streams, then sure, you might get up to 600 megabits per second.
Yeah, exactly. It can go up pretty fast, but it's also going to depend, obviously, on the the capabilities of the client device. Right. The rate will be negotiated between the client and the AP. But anyway, it gave us a whole bunch of new data rates available. Before that, it was it was doable to remember all the data rates available. But after that, it becomes really hard to remember all the different data rates.
Yeah,
maybe Devin knows all of them.
Yeah, there might be a few people that actually know it off the top of their head. I think it'd be more important to learn about MCS. And,
exactly.
That would help. And I actually just referenced mcsindex.com. I think that's the site, which tells you what data rate you could expect to achieve given your MCS rate.
Exactly. So that's why you'll see in the table we put together, we stopped to use data rates at 11N and we started to use MCS indexes. So if you want to know exactly what data rate is hidden behind the MCS index, you can go to the mcsindex.com website and you'll get the details. But pretty much depending on the channel width you're using, depending on the quad interval, depending on the modulation, and depending on the number of streams, you will end up using a different data rate.
Yep. And I will say, because this is dual band, 802.11n works on both 2.4 and 5, and you can use 40 megahertz channel width. Just because you could use 40 megahertz channel widths in 2.4 doesn't mean you should. So because you only have 3 non-overlapping channels in 2.4, always stick to the 20 megahertz channel widths in 2.4 for you and your neighbors.
Yeah, that's a good advice.
So the next PHY type here is 802.11 AC, and this one came out in 2 different waves. And waves meaning a marketing term, I guess, right? Which was you had a set of new features in wave 1, and then later on a wave 2 was released, which had more features. And so what we saw here is this is a VHT, which means very high throughput. And it was very high throughput because they enabled 80 megahertz channel widths and 160 megahertz channel widths. And then they increased the spatial stream count to 8 spatial streams, which meant the marketing language, you got up to 6.9 gigabits per second. Now, this is just, if you're going to run through the numbers, that's what you can get. But in the real world, you're probably not going to get, you're probably not going to see 6.9 gigabits per second. And this only operated in the 5 gigahertz spectrum. So it was an improvement that we saw in 5 gigahertz, but not many of us actually use 80 or 160 megahertz channel widths in the real world. I would only see that in the home, for example.
Yeah, and also they introduced a new modulation scheme, 256 QAM, which introduced a new set of data rates available to us.
Yeah, and that's how you got up to 6.9. But again, that high of a QAM, you're probably going to have to be right underneath the AP with clean spectrum.
Yeah, usually it's if you're within the room where the AP is, if the room is not the open space, obviously. But if you're within the room, like let's say in a conference room and you have an AP in the conference room, you should be able to achieve 256 QAM and get access to those, higher data rates.
But in many enterprise environments, for example, or office spaces, there are probably other neighboring Wi-Fi networks. So being able to use such a high QAM is probably not achievable 100% of the time.
No, yeah, you're right.
So that's just one thing to consider when using 802.11 AC. Not that it's a PHY type that's not used. All the APs that you see nowadays support 802.11 AC, and it does pave way for kind of future standards because, for one, it's good to see the channel widths that are available, but it doesn't allow you to have enough channels for reuse. So depending on how many APs you have to deploy, right? You have to think about, okay, how many reusable channels and am I going to be able to use until I start having channel overlap in my environment? So something to consider. And also the 6.9 gigabits per second is something to talk with your client or your end users, because they may think that that's the speed they're going to get, the throughput speed they may get, but that's not the case.
And also, at this point, you might wonder, what's the difference between AC Wave 1 and AC Wave 2? Right? I got this question quite a bit.
That's a good point, yeah.
Yeah, so one of the differences is the channel width, right? So with Wave 2, we got access to 160 megahertz channel width. The main difference, I would say, is multi-user MIMO. So multi-user MIMO is the ability to send information to multiple client devices at the same time using different streams, right? And multi-user MIMO got introduced with Wave 2, but only downstream, so only for the traffic leaving the AP going to the clients.
Yeah, and does that mean, though, the clients have to support MU MIMO?
Yes, the client has to support multi-user MIMO, and the AP obviously has to support multi-user MIMO.
So even now, we're still not seeing enough devices supporting MU MIMO, and even supporting many more spatial streams. And that's due to either the cost of putting that into a device or battery power, right? You're not going to see this on mobile devices just because it's probably going to kill the battery fairly quickly.
And also with multi-user MIMO, you have this physical, separation. Yeah. So depending on how your client devices are spread around in your environment, you might or might not be able to be able to take advantage of multi-user MIMO.
And the one thing everyone should be aware of is when some of these vendors or anyone selling Wi-Fi talks about 802.11 AC or maybe any other PHY that comes out, is they're going to call it switch-like. And it's definitely not switch-like.
Yeah.
We're still talking about half duplex here. So if we're talking about switch-like, it's going to have to be full duplex.
Not yet.
Yeah,
Maybe
we're not there yet. It's not quite that fast. And also many people design still with 20 or 40 megahertz channel width. So we're still not going to get to see the 6.9 gigabits per second there.
Yeah. That's what I do. I design most of my networks in 20 and 40.
Yep. Same with me.
So the only time I did 80 was for very specific needs, and we did only for local space.
Yeah. Even at home, I don't use 40 megahertz.
Works I think I have 80 at home.
Yeah, I should try. I have too many close neighbors nearby. So I live in San Jose where the neighbors are literally outside my window. So I hear everyone's networks and everyone's blasting at 80 megahertz. And even at 40, I can see a performance hit.
Wow. Did you try the DFS channels?
Yeah, I'm on DFS.
Oh, already? Oh, yeah. Wow.
I strictly just use DFS and 5 gig just to get away from everyone else.
Okay. All right.
So now we have our next standard that's coming out fairly soon, right?
Yeah, I guess we cannot call it a standard yet because it hasn't been
ratified.
Yeah, it hasn't been ratified. It's still in the draft stage. It's 802.11ax, and they called it HE, high efficiency. Right. Yep. So up until VHT, so up until 802.11ac, the goal was to get a fast speed. Whenever they released a new version of the protocol, they wanted faster speed. For this one, for the AX, what they wanted is high efficiency. So they wanted to have less overhead and make it more efficient. And obviously, because it's more efficient, it's going to be faster a little bit. But that wasn't the primary focus
Right.
for this one.
Yeah, and I feel like this was aimed more towards the congested environments, right? Your apartment complexes, your very dense office spaces, and I think maybe this was driven more by your ISPs as they try to push more Wi-Fi services through your ISP, right? Like they were using Wi-Fi that's on the box, but now you're seeing a lot of the mesh type solutions get thrown out there from ISPs such as Comcast with Plume, for example. I can see 802.11ax really making this improved for the ISP, especially if they're going to be in every single apartment unit in a 4-story apartment complex.
Yeah, and I'm thinking maybe it's also pushed by vendors that had issues in like very high density environment, maybe like stadiums and places like that.
Yeah,
where they could see that
there.
like a very small packet will still use the same amount of airtime, and it wouldn't be as efficient as it could be. So maybe it's also driven by those type of scenarios.
Yeah, and it could bring back 2.4 even stronger, is what people will say, right? We've heard people say 2.4 is pretty much unusable or it's dead, but 802.11ax, if you guys haven't heard from Wi-Fi Now, is some of the vendors are saying it's going to bring back 2.4 because it's going to be more efficient.
I can probably hear that for all the IoT devices we're using.
Yeah.
I'm not too sure about business critical applications.
Yeah, I feel like this is more aimed towards the home. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
That's how it looks like to me, and that's just based off of me going to Wi-Fi Now and seeing some of these vendors talk, and they're really excited about 802.11ax because it will be able to make more profits for your service provider. Because if they're giving you ISP service, right? If you're getting internet from them, they could upsell you on a Wi-Fi solution that they manage. You just install it throughout your house. And if 802.11ax makes it more efficient, makes Wi-Fi more efficient, then they can be able to provide a better service to you.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely challenging for them right now.
It is. It'll be interesting to see what happens when this comes out, because it does support a 1024 QAM, which sounds crazy, but
that's a new modulation. Yeah,
like you almost have to be right next to the AP in order to get that QAM.
Yeah, I don't know. I want to test this one because that's the one I'm curious about. Where do you get 1024 QAM?
Yeah, and don't we have APs that are shipping now with 802.11ax? We just need the clients.
Yeah, I think AeroHave is shipping APs right now with AX. We just need the clients, like you said. We'll see. Probably soon. I've heard before the end of the year. So,
and also this supports the full MU-MIMO.
Yeah, so multi-user MIMO used to be only downlink with AC Wave 2. With AX, it's going to be downlink and uplink. So also handled for the traffic coming from the clients going back to the AP. So that's one of the improvement of AX. The second, I would say the biggest improvement with AX will be OFDM-A.
Yeah, that's going to be very different.
Yeah, which will be used with OFDM, and it stands for orthogonal frequency division multiple access, and this gives us the ability to split the 20 megahertz channel we typically use in OFDM, and then split it in different subchannels to service different clients at the same time.
Wow!
So once again, making it more efficient.
Yeah, we're gonna get coloring as well with 802.11ax, which is going to make analysis maybe a little more complex.
Yeah, BSS coloring. Maybe we could do, episode on that alone,
we should
right?
have a dedicated episode on this. Yeah.
But
I need to see it first.
basically what happens right now if two APs are on the same channel and they can hear each other. If one AP talk, the other one will pretty much wait and wait their turn before sending frames onto the channels. With BSS coloring, you could attach a color to an AP, and then if the APs don't have the same colors, they'll pretty much talk over each other. That's kind of like the idea.
Yeah, if AeroHive wants to, give us a couple APs to test out, I think we'd be more than happy to.
Okay.
We just need clients.
Yeah. Well, two AeroHive APs together, you can probably make them talk.
Yeah,
right?
maybe you can turn one into a client. I think that would work.
All right. I don't know.
Well, that's all the PHY types we're going to talk about in this episode. There's actually a couple more, but I think that's more advanced for this discussion. I think the others could warrant their own episode, but we talked about 802.11 prime, 11A, 11B, 11G, and AC and AX. And all of these you'll be able to find in CWNP material, in the CWS, CWT, and CWNA. And as a reminder, we have our giveaway that we're doing. So head over to the show notes. I'll link out to where you can sign up for that giveaway. But head over to the show notes for the table that we have. I think that'll also be useful to have and to help understand the different various PHY types and what the differences are between them. Yeah, I think it's...
And if you can sleep at night, we added the number of the clause for each PHY type. So if you want to read the standards and get to know them a little bit better, you can go ahead and reference those.
Cool. And that's it for our episode. So we hope you enjoyed this one. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section of the show notes or hit us up on Twitter and we'll be happy to answer them. Or if you have anything else to add to this episode, we would appreciate that as well. Maybe there's something we're missing or something you want to add in addition to, or any other resources that might be helpful. So we'll see you guys on the next episode.
Thank you, guys. See you. Bye-bye.